I never liked helicopters. Something about the way they rattle, like they're barely holding themselves together in the air, always made my stomach twist. But there I was, strapped into the back seat of one, with my duffel bag jammed between my knees, watching the forest stretch out below me like an endless green sea. We were flying over the Bitterroot Mountains, thick, jagged wilderness, miles from the nearest paved road. Out here, the trees don't end. They just keep going, like the world forgot to stop them. Towers just ahead, the pilot called over the headset. His voice crackled. Got a real pretty spot this time of year. Clear skies, good sight lines. You'll be able to see fires 10 miles out. I didn't say anything, just nodded and kept my eyes on the tower as it came into view, a narrow metal structure poking out of the canopy like a rusted needle. It looked smaller than I remembered, but that's how it always felt at first. This was my 10th year returning to the same post, and every time, that first glimpse gave me a strange twist in my chest, like I was watching something wait for me. The chopper touched down in a small clearing. I grabbed my bag and stepped out into the smell of pine and dry grass, the sound of rotor blades hammering the air. The pilot didn't linger. He gave a lazy wave, then rose into the sky, shrinking fast until he was gone. And just like that, I was alone. Again. The climb up the tower never got easier. It was a steel ladder bolted to the side, and the steps creaked under my boots like they were complaining. 32 rungs. I counted them every time. 32 chances to slip. 32 moments to think about turning around. At the top, I unlocked the trapdoor and pulled myself into the cab. It was just like I left it. Same wooden floor with the faded compass rose painted in the center. Same narrow cot against the wall. Same firefinder mounted in the middle of the room, pointing silently out the windows in every direction. The place smelled like old paper, smoke, and a hint of mildew. Home, in its own strange way. I dropped my bag and did a quick check. Water tanks were full. Generator looked good. The shortwave radio clicked on with a satisfying hum. I keyed it. "This is Tower 6, I said, reporting in for the season. There was a pause. Then a friendly voice came back. "Welcome back, Alvaro. This is base. You're early. I like to settle in. Copy that. You'll be sharing airspace with Tower 4 and Tower 8 this season. Should be a quiet summer." I nodded, even though no one could see me. "Let's hope." We signed off. I set the radio down and turned in a slow circle, looking out the glass. From up here, the world didn't seem real. Just an ocean of green hills rolling off into the distance. Somewhere out there were towns, roads, people. But they might as well have been ghosts. Out here, it was just me. Me and the trees. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking. Books. Journal. My camera. A photograph of my brother, Luis, taken when he was 16, just before he disappeared. I slipped it into the corner of the mirror above the desk. The sun dipped low, casting gold across the treetops. I heated a can of chili on the camp stove, ate it straight from the pot, and climbed up onto the roof to watch the sky fade from orange to purple. It was quiet. No wind. No bugs. Just that eerie, perfect stillness that only seems to exist in deep woods. The kind that presses in on you, like the world is holding its breath. I should have felt peaceful, but I didn't. Even on the first day, something felt off. Like the tower wasn't empty when I arrived. Like something had been waiting for me to come back. And as I climbed back down into the cab for the night, locked the hatch, and slid into my sleeping bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was listening. Watching. Waiting. And somewhere deep in those trees, something remembered me. I just didn't know it yet. The mornings always started the same way. The sky would bleed from black to gray, then to a soft orange that lit up the tops of the trees like they were on fire. I'd sit on the edge of the observation deck, coffee in hand, blanket around my shoulders, listening to the forest breathe. 10 years in this tower, and the silence never stopped feeling heavy, like something pressing down on you. Most people think silence is peaceful. But up here it had a weight to it. It wasn't empty. It was watching. It was on the third morning of my return that I saw the ridge trail, the same one we hiked as kids. There was still a bare path between the trees, like the forest had never grown over it. I could almost see two boys there, one taller than the other, laughing, chasing each other with sticks. The taller one was me. The smaller one was Nico, my little brother. That memory came back like a punch. It always did when I saw that trail. I hadn't planned to think about him this season. I told myself I was past it. Told myself it had been 24 years, and I'd already mourned him, accepted what happened. But I hadn't. Not really. The day Nico disappeared, we were camping with our uncle, just 3 miles from here. We snuck off before sunrise to explore. There was this stupid game we used to play, Ranger and Fugitive. He'd run ahead, and I'd track him, trying to bring him to justice. It was harmless, or so I thought. That morning, he vanished like smoke in the trees. I called and called. Hours passed. My uncle called search and rescue. They never found him. Not a shoe. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a scream. Just gone. People said a cougar probably got him. Or he fell into a ravine and was never found. But even then, I felt something else had taken him. Something quiet. Something old. Now every time I come back, I hope, just a little, that I'll find something. A sign. A clue. Something to finally tell me what happened that day. I never do. That morning, I couldn't take my eyes off the ridge. I pulled my binoculars from the hook by the window and scanned the trees. Then I saw him. A figure. Small. Standing just where the trail dipped into the ravine. He looked like Nico. Same bowl haircut, same ratty gray hoodie. Just standing there, still as a stone. My chest seized up. The binoculars trembled in my hands. I blinked. He was gone. I lowered the binoculars and stared at the empty ridge. I didn't breathe for a long time. Eventually, I pulled out my logbook and wrote it down. Saw figure near West Ridge. Possibly a hiker. It wasn't the truth, but it was easier than what I wanted to write. Saw my dead brother watching me from the trees. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The wind whistled through the slats in the tower walls. The boards creaked. Something knocked softly against the base of the tower, over and over, like a loose rope or branch. But there was no wind. I sat up in bed and listened. Knock. 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 I rose and walked to the hatch that led down to the stairs. Opened it slowly. Nothing. Just dark. I stared into the shadows for a long time. Then, barely above a whisper, I heard a voice rise from the trees. Alvaro. I froze. I didn't move. I didn't blink. The voice sounded exactly like Nico. But he'd been gone a long time. And the forest doesn't give back what it takes. The third night was the worst so far. Not because anything dramatic happened, no monsters bursting through the trees, no bloodstains on the windows, but because of what I almost heard. That kind of uncertainty, it gets inside your head, curls up in the corners, and waits. It started around 2 a.m. I was sitting at the desk, half dozing over my logbook, a pencil loose in my hand. Outside, the wind pushed through the trees with a soft hiss, like the forest was whispering something just out of earshot. I'd been fighting sleep for the last hour, trying to keep my routine, scan log, scan again, but my eyes were heavy and my mind was drifting. Then the radio crackled. Not loud, just a thin flicker of static. I sat up straight, heart thumping. My hand went for the receiver automatically. I waited, thinking maybe it was Cassie checking in from her post on Black Elk Ridge. We kept regular contact on Channel 19. Nothing came. Channel 19. This is Lookout 9. I said into the mic, anyone out there? Silence. I leaned back, gave it a minute, then switched channels just in case. Nothing. Back to 19. And then, just as I was about to set the receiver down, I heard it. My name. Whispered slow and wrong. Not just like someone saying Alvaro, over a weak connection. No, it came through stretched, like a warped cassette tape playing too slow. It had no emotion. Flat and strange. Al. Varar. Oh. I froze. You ever hear something that makes every hair on your body rise at once? That was it. I didn't move for a full minute. I just sat there staring at the radio like it had grown eyes. I swallowed hard. Pressed the mic again. Who is this? No answer. I waited. My hand hovered above the power dial, debating whether to turn it off completely. Then finally static again. A burst this time, followed by another voice. This one clearer. Channel 19, you copy? This is Cassie. I nearly dropped the mic. Yeah, Cassie. This is 9. I read you. You okay? You sounded a little weird. I hesitated. Weird how? She paused. I could hear wind through her open window, rustling paper in the background. Like you were talking in your sleep, all broken up. I couldn't understand what you were saying. I didn't respond right away. My eyes shifted to the logbook. The pencil was gone. Just gone. Not rolled onto the floor. Not under my boot. Just missing. I haven't said anything, I replied slowly. I haven't touched the mic until now. There was a longer silence on her end this time. Maybe it's the storm. Interference. Had some weird stuff on my end too. Probably nothing. Yeah, I said, though I didn't believe it. Probably. We signed off. I tried to go back to logging. Tried to pretend everything was fine. But every few minutes, I'd glance over at the radio, waiting for it to come to life again. And then there was the door. Just after 3:13 a.m., I checked the clock. I heard it. One soft knock. Just one. Not pounding. Not scratching. Just a firm single knock. I stared at the door for what felt like an hour. I didn't go to it. I didn't speak. I just sat there and let the silence settle around me like a second skin. Eventually, I dozed off in the chair, the radio still on. When I woke up, the sun was rising behind the ridge, and the forest looked almost peaceful again, like none of it had ever happened. But I found the pencil outside, on the landing, balanced neatly on the railing, right beside the locked door. And it wasn't my pencil. Mine had teeth marks. I chew when I think. This one was clean. I didn't log that part, but I remember it. Every detail. The third night was the worst so far. Not because anything dramatic happened. No monsters bursting through the trees, no bloodstains on the windows, but because of what I almost heard. That kind of uncertainty. It gets inside your head, curls up in the corners, and waits. It started around 2 a.m. I was sitting at the desk, half dozing over my logbook, a pencil loose in my hand. Outside, the wind pushed through the trees with a soft hiss, like the forest was whispering something just out of earshot. I'd been fighting sleep for the last hour, trying to keep my routine, scan log, scan again, but my eyes were heavy and my mind was drifting. Then the radio crackled. Not loud, just a thin flicker of static. I sat up straight, heart thumping. My hand went for the receiver automatically. I waited, thinking maybe it was Cassie checking in from her post on Black Elk Ridge. We kept regular contact on Channel 19. Nothing came. Channel 19. This is Lookout 9. I said into the mic, anyone out there? Silence. I leaned back, gave it a minute, then switched channels just in case. Nothing. Back to 19. And then just as I was about to set the receiver down, I heard it. My name. Whispered, slow and wrong. Not just like someone saying, Alvaro, over a weak connection. No, it came through stretched, like a warped cassette tape playing too slow. It had no emotion. Flat and strange. Al. Varar, oh. I froze. You ever hear something that makes every hair on your body rise at once? That was it. I didn't move for a full minute. I just sat there staring at the radio like it had grown eyes. I swallowed hard. Pressed the mic again. Who is this? No answer. I waited. My hand hovered above the power dial, debating whether to turn it off completely. Then finally static again. A burst this time, followed by another voice. This one clearer. Channel 19, you copy? This is Cassie. I nearly dropped the mic. Yeah, Cassie. This is 9. I read you. You okay? You sounded a little weird. I hesitated. Weird how? She paused. I could hear wind through her open window, rustling paper in the background. Like you were talking in your sleep. All broken up. I couldn't understand what you were saying. I didn't respond right away. My eyes shifted to the logbook. The pencil was gone. Just gone. Not rolled onto the floor. Not under my boot. Just missing. I haven't said anything, I replied slowly. I haven't touched the mic until now. There was a longer silence on her end this time. Maybe it's the storm. Interference. Had some weird stuff on my end too. Probably nothing. Yeah, I said, though I didn't believe it. Probably. We signed off. I tried to go back to logging. Tried to pretend everything was fine. But every few minutes, I'd glance over at the radio, waiting for it to come to life again. And then there was the door. Just after 3:13 a.m., I checked the clock. I heard it. One soft knock. Just one. Not pounding. Not scratching. Just a firm single knock. I stared at the door for what felt like an hour. I didn't go to it. I didn't speak. I just sat there and let the silence settle around me like a second skin. Eventually, I dozed off in the chair, the radio still on. When I woke up, the sun was rising behind the ridge, and the forest looked almost peaceful again, like none of it had ever happened. But I found the pencil outside, on the landing, balanced neatly on the railing, right beside the locked door. And it wasn't my pencil. Mine had teeth marks. I chew when I think. This one was clean. I didn't log that part, but I remember it. Every detail. Something's wrong with the mirrors. There aren't many in the tower, just the little square one above the sink and the old, fogged-up piece of glass mounted behind the door. But they've started to feel off, like they're showing more than they should. Or less. I first noticed it 3 mornings ago. I was brushing my teeth, staring blankly at my own tired face, when I caught a flicker of movement in the mirror. A shadow. Fast. Like someone walking behind me. But when I turned around, there was nothing. Just the empty room. Just the quiet. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. Being up here alone, surrounded by nothing but forest and sky, does strange things to your head. You start seeing patterns in the trees, hearing voices in the wind. So I let it go. I even laughed at myself. But the next morning, it happened again. This time, the figure in the mirror wasn't a blur. It was clearer. A shape. A man. Standing just behind my left shoulder. I could make out the line of his jaw, the curve of a forehead. His mouth was open like he was trying to speak. And then I blinked, and he was gone. I didn't laugh that time. Instead, I took down the mirror, put it face down under the bed. Out of sight. I thought maybe if I didn't look, I wouldn't see him again. Whatever he was. That night, I had the dream again. I was back in the woods with Mateo, my little brother. The two of us were sitting on that flat rock by the river, skipping stones. Only in the dream, the river wasn't moving. The water was still like glass. I could see our reflections, but they weren't right. They weren't us. Mateo's reflection turned and smiled at me, even though the real Mateo was still staring at the water. And mine leaned in closer, staring with wide, hollow eyes. When I woke up, my hands were covered in dirt. There was mud under my fingernails. I hadn't left the tower all night, as far as I knew. I locked the door before I went to bed. I checked the latch. I even slid the metal rod into place. But something got in. Or maybe something got out. I don't know. I told myself it was sleepwalking. A bad dream. That maybe I'd wandered out, half asleep, walked barefoot around the tower in the dark. But deep down, I don't believe that. Deep down, I think I was following something. Or someone. Later that day, I opened James Holloway's journal again. I don't know why. I keep telling myself to burn it, to toss it off the mountain, to forget about it altogether. But I can't. It feels like it wants to be read. Like it's waiting for me. This time I flipped to a random page, maybe halfway through. The ink was smeared, like it had been written during a storm. But the words still chilled me. The mirrors don't reflect you after the third sighting. They show where you're going. They want you to follow. Underneath the entry, in darker ink, like it had been written much later, there was a single sentence. I saw him again. This time he was smiling. I closed the book and slid it back under the floorboard. Outside, the trees swayed in a wind I couldn't feel. The clouds hung low and gray, thick like smoke. The forest stretched on in every direction, endless and old. I don't think I'm alone here anymore. And I'm starting to wonder if I ever was. The morning was colder than usual. A thin sheet of frost clung to the windows, even though it was late June. I stood at the edge of the lookout tower's deck, coffee in hand, scanning the forest below through binoculars. Nothing. Just endless trees, swaying gently under a pale, washed-out sky. But something felt wrong. Not wrong in a dramatic way. Not the kind of wrong that makes you sprint for safety, but the quiet, unsettling wrongness that crawls under your skin and sits there. I couldn't name it. The wind was too quiet. The birds were missing. Even the usual crackle of the radio was silent. I went back inside and checked the logbook. My handwriting looked strange, uneven and rushed. I didn't remember writing last night's entry. Saw movement in the trees at 2:46 a.m. scratching on the deck again. Dreamt of the pit. Woke up with dirt under nails. My chest tightened. Dirt under my nails? I stared at my hands. Clean now, but I couldn't stop imagining the grainy, cold feel of soil wedged under each fingernail. Had I written that as a dream, or a fact? I grabbed the broom and stepped outside. Maybe I was just getting too caught up in James's journal. That thing was warping my thoughts. Still, I swept the deck, half expecting to find claw marks. I found something worse. Blood. A thin streak, like something had been dragged across the wooden boards. My stomach turned. It led to the stairs and disappeared down the steps into the trees. I stood frozen for a moment. Then I went down one slow step at a time, heart hammering. The trail was faint but visible. Dark smears against moss and pine needles, occasionally broken up by tufts of fur. It led me maybe 30 yards from the tower before I saw it. A deer. Or what was left of one. It lay in the middle of a small clearing, its body twisted unnaturally, legs bent at wrong angles. Its eyes were gone, just hollow sockets staring up at the gray sky. But it wasn't just the death that disturbed me. It was the placement. The body had been arranged. The deer's head pointed toward the tower. Its legs were spread evenly, like the arms of a compass. Its entrails, God help me, had been pulled from the stomach and placed in a spiral around the corpse. Not chewed, not ripped at randomly. Arranged. Like art. Like a warning. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a root. A sound behind me made me turn, just a bird fluttering away. I stayed still for several long minutes. My breath came out in clouds. I couldn't stop staring at the spiral. Who did this? Or what? I walked back to the tower, faster than I intended, heart thudding in my throat. I didn't look back. Back inside, I checked the radio. Static. I called out. Lookout 6 to Cassie. Come in. Anyone got ears on? Nothing but the hiss and crackle of dead air. I sat down at the table and opened James's journal. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove I was still sane. Or maybe I hoped he'd written something, anything, that could explain what I just saw. Flipping through the yellowed pages, I stopped on an entry dated 10 years ago to the day. Found another offering. Spiral pattern again. Dear this time. Same direction, always pointed at the tower. I think it's marking me. I stared at the words, my hand shaking. Outside, something brushed against the side of the tower. Just a soft scrape, like a branch caught by the wind. But there was no wind. I slept with the lights on that night. Not that it helped. Because sometime after midnight, I woke up standing outside the tower, barefoot, dirt between my toes. And when I looked down at my hands, my nails were packed with soil. I don't remember leaving the bed. And I wasn't dreaming. I never dream with my eyes open. The wind had been quiet all morning, still as the mountains themselves. But now, as I sat at the table in the tower, I heard the faintest rustle. It wasn't from the trees or the rocks. It came from deep in the woods, so deep, I couldn't tell which direction it was coming from. I brushed it off, just another trick of the wind, I thought. It had been a long season already. My thoughts were starting to drift, and when that happens, you begin to notice things that aren't there. I shifted in my chair, the radio static crackling in the background, something I'd grown used to. I adjusted the mic, and tried to reach out to Cassie on channel 19. No response. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes the signal went out for hours or even days. I leaned forward and stared out across the valley. The forest stretched endlessly, a sea of green that went on for miles. I felt small out there, alone on the tower with nothing but the trees to keep me company. In the distance, the smoke from an unseen fire curled up into the sky. I had just finished writing my report when I noticed the sky growing darker. It wasn't the usual clouds rolling in. This was something else. Something felt wrong. I grabbed my binoculars and focused them on the smoke. There was no sign of a fire line, no telltale plume of heat rising into the air. It was off. The smoke was moving strangely. It came and went, dissipating into the air as if it had no reason to exist in the first place. A chill ran through me. I set down the binoculars and reached for the radio again, trying Cassie once more. Static, nothing but static. Then the wind picked up. It howled through the trees, shaking the tower, rattling the windows. It wasn't the gusts that got me, though. It was the silence that followed. The sudden absence of sound. I was about to turn on the emergency broadcast when I heard it, faint at first, like the whisper of a memory. A voice. It wasn't Cassie's. Or Tom's. Not even a ranger. It was different. It echoed in my head like it was coming from the trees themselves. It's time. You've waited long enough, Alvaro. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed the radio, but my hands were shaking too much to get a proper signal. I slammed it down in frustration, my pulse racing. I stood up, pacing the small room, feeling the walls closing on me. It's time. I wanted to laugh, to scream, but I was too tired. I hadn't slept in days, and the strange occurrences were starting to bleed together. The dreams, the whispers, the strange animals I kept seeing out of the corner of my eye. Nothing made sense anymore. Not the smoke, not the voice, and certainly not the way the trees seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I forced myself to focus. I grabbed my notebook and began writing. I always wrote when things got bad. It helped clear my mind, even if just for a little while. The pages were filled with my thoughts, my fears, and the growing sense that something deep in the woods was coming for me. I didn't know if it was real or just my mind unraveling. Maybe both. But the feeling was real. It was heavy, like the weight of the entire forest pressing down on me. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, bright, sharp, cutting through the trees on the far side of the ridge. I rushed to the window and pressed my forehead against the glass. It wasn't the reflection of the sun. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't anything I'd seen before. The light blinked again, flickering almost like a signal. A warning. Then it was gone, as if the forest had swallowed it whole. I turned away from the window, breathing heavily. The world outside had become distorted. The trees felt wrong, like they were no longer just trees, but something else entirely. Watching me. Waiting. I was about to pick up the radio again when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, and close. I froze. It was coming from beneath the tower. The steps were slow, as if whoever, or whatever, was out there wanted me to hear them. Wanted me to know they were there. I grabbed the flashlight and crept to the door. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I could feel my hands sweating, slipping around the handle. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe it was Cassie, maybe a ranger, maybe some rational explanation for the weirdness that had been creeping in on me since I'd stepped foot back in this godforsaken place. I opened the door. The world outside was dark, the trees cast in deep shadows. But there was no one there. Just silence. I scanned the ground below the tower with the beam of my flashlight. Nothing. No footprints. No sign of movement. The night was still, too still. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. I stepped outside, my feet crunching on the dry earth. I didn't know what I was doing, but I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I had to know. I had to see if there was anyone or anything out there. But the more I searched, the more I felt the creeping sensation that I wasn't alone. That I hadn't been alone for a long time. I walked around the base of the tower, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made me jump. But there was nothing, and then I saw it. At the edge of the clearing. A figure, just beyond the reach of my flashlight beam. Tall. Thin. Standing perfectly still, watching me. I froze. I couldn't tell if it was human. The figure seemed wrong. Its outline blurred, flickering in and out of focus like something caught between two worlds. I wanted to call out. I wanted to run. But my legs wouldn't move. My throat felt tight, the words stuck inside me. The figure raised one arm, as if to wave or beckon. But before I could move, the figure vanished into the trees, melting into the shadows as if it had never been there at all. I stood there, alone in the dark, feeling like the world around me had just shifted, like the forest was no longer just a collection of trees and earth, but something alive. Something hungry. I didn't wait around any longer. I slammed the door shut behind me and bolted the lock, praying that whatever it was would stay out there. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't. I woke up to a strange sound, a faint scraping against wood. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a branch swaying against the tower. But then it came again. Sharper. A dragging noise. I sat up, my heart thudding, but when I glanced around the room, everything was still. The wind didn't even stir the trees outside. I'd been up since dawn, scanning the horizon for smoke. Nothing but the usual wilderness stretching out in every direction. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. But that wasn't why I felt unsettled. I was used to the isolation. What was gnawing at me wasn't the silence. It was the feeling that something had changed. That something was watching me, waiting for me to make the wrong move. The journal lay beside me on the cot, its leather cover worn, pages turning yellow at the edges. James's words had been haunting me for days. His scribbled warnings about the forest, the way it seemed to twist and bend reality. He wasn't just talking about fire season. He was talking about something deeper, something older. The way the trees seemed to shift when you weren't looking. The things that didn't belong in the woods. The way the land remembers, and it takes when it needs to. I grabbed my pack, slinging it over my shoulder. Today felt like a day for answers, though I wasn't sure if I really wanted them. The sun had just begun to dip behind the mountains when I decided to head out. The tower would be fine on its own for a few hours. I just needed to clear my head. The path was familiar. I had walked it countless times during my years as a lookout, always with the feeling that I was being drawn deeper into the forest. The trees here had a way of pulling at you, as if they were stretching their limbs toward you, trying to catch your attention. They had always felt like old friends to me, solid, dependable. But today they felt off. The trail was narrow, choked with roots and brambles. I could barely hear my footsteps, the forest so quiet that it felt like it was holding its breath. My breath came in slow, shallow bursts as I walked, my eyes scanning the ground for any signs of disturbance. A branch snapped in the distance, too far to be a deer. But when I turned toward it, there was nothing. The air felt heavier than usual, the weight of it pressing down on my shoulders. I kept moving, pushing past the feeling of being followed. I knew the trail well. It was one of the older paths, barely used anymore. Most lookouts avoided it, but it had always intrigued me. There was something about the way the trees closed in, forming a kind of natural tunnel. I had heard stories about it from other rangers, whispers of strange things being found along this trail. Broken radios, shredded maps. Some said it was just the wind, others claimed it was the work of animals. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. I reached a clearing after an hour of walking. It was small, just enough room for the shadows of the trees to stretch across the ground. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. And then I saw it. A tree, standing alone at the far edge of the clearing. Its bark was torn away in large, jagged patches, and its roots twisted unnaturally, like fingers reaching into the soil. I felt a pang of unease, the kind that sinks into your chest and refuses to leave. The ground beneath it was disturbed, as though something heavy had recently been dragged across it. But what really made me stop was the teeth. I crouched down, my breath catching in my throat. At first, I thought they were rocks scattered around the base of the tree. But when I looked closer, I realized they weren't rocks at all. They were teeth, animal teeth, human teeth, and others I couldn't even recognize. They were ground into the earth, like some kind of offering, some kind of ritual. I reached for one of them, half expecting it to crumble under my fingers, but it didn't. The tooth was solid, slick with something dark. Something sticky. I recoiled, wiping my hand on my pants, and stood up quickly, my pulse racing. That's when I noticed something else. A path, faint, almost invisible, leading off deeper into the trees. It was marked by more teeth, more discarded bones, and strange symbols carved into the bark of the trees. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the path. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't just an animal trail. This was something human, or whatever was left of humanity in this place. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The air grew colder the further I went, and the sounds of the forest seemed to fall away. I felt like I was walking in a dream, or a nightmare. The world around me felt warped, twisted, as if the trees themselves were closing in, pushing me deeper into the darkness. The path led me to a small, shallow pit. The ground was soft here, and the air smelled of decay. And in the center of the pit was something that made my stomach turn. It was an old fire lookout helmet, caked in dirt and moss. The metal was dented, and it was missing the visor. But what really caught my eye was the shape carved into the side of the helmet, a symbol I had seen before, drawn in James's journal. It was the same symbol that had been etched into the bark of the trees, the one that twisted and spiraled like a coil. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what it meant. Was James here? Had he left this behind? Was it another warning? I reached down, my fingers trembling, to touch the helmet. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Low. Chilling. It came from behind me, close enough that I could feel the breath on the back of my neck. You shouldn't have come here, Alvaro. I froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was James. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't alone. I turned around slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. But there was nothing there. Just the trees. Just the shadows. And a feeling of something watching me from the darkness. I backed away, my legs shaking, the pit in my stomach growing deeper with each step. The trail I had followed now felt like a trap, pulling me in. I had to leave. I had to get out of there before it took me too. But when I turned to retrace my steps, the trail was gone. It had vanished into the forest. The trees were watching. And I was trapped. The radio crackled to life at 3:14 a.m. I remember the time because I'd set the clock to alarm me every hour like a fool. I kept it as a ritual, thinking if I stayed alert, I'd somehow stay safe. But that night, I was awake. Eyes wide open, heart slamming in my chest, as the static built into something more, a voice. Distorted, but undeniably real. Alvaro. Alvaro, it's too late. I froze. That was my name. My full name. No mistaking it. A cold sweat pooled at the back of my neck. The voice wasn't anyone I recognized. But I knew it. I knew it deep in my bones. I grabbed the mic, heart pounding, breath thick in my throat. Who's this? My voice came out rough, hoarse, like I hadn't spoken in days. The response was a low whisper at first. I couldn't make out the words, but there was something familiar about it. Something chilling. The crackling intensified, louder than before, the hum of the radio shaking in my hands. Then, clear as day, I heard it again. Alvaro, come find me. It sounded like James. James Holloway, the man who had been a lookout here before me. The one who disappeared. The one they said had fallen and been eaten by something in the woods. But I knew better. The man had gone mad before he left. The things he'd written. The warnings in his journal. They weren't just ramblings. I could feel my skin tightening. The air grew cold around me, like the tower itself was exhaling a breath it shouldn't. Every time I looked at the radio, it felt as if it were watching me back. "James," I whispered, testing the air like I was afraid the name might summon something worse. The static dropped for a moment, and then a laugh. A hollow, low laugh. "You'll never leave." James's voice came through again, as clear as if he were standing right behind me. "It's already too late for you." I felt my pulse rise, panic clawing at my throat. I couldn't think. The radio hissed again, filling the air with the kind of pressure that makes your ears pop. I ripped the mic from its holder and pressed it harder into my face. "What do you want from me?" A long pause. A silence so thick I could almost taste it. Then the voice came back, but this time, it wasn't James anymore. It was something else. Something darker. Something that had slipped into his voice like an old coat. "I've been waiting for you." The words hung in the air, and I felt my stomach drop. I looked out the window into the abyss of the forest, trying to find something, anything moving. But it was all still. Too still. Too quiet. The wind wasn't even whispering. The radio crackled once more, and I jumped, the static buzzing in my skull. I couldn't look away from the dark windows. That voice, it felt like it was outside, behind the tower, just beyond my reach. "Alvaro, we are the forest now." The air grew thicker still. I stared at the radio as if it might devour me. My hands shook. I reached out, trembling, and I tried to turn it off, but the dial slipped under my fingers as if it wasn't real, as if it were no longer my tower. The world was slipping. I knew it. The radio was alive, pulling me into the forest, into the voice, into the thing that had been waiting for me. I stood there, frozen, too scared to leave, too scared to stay. Then suddenly the voice cut off. Nothing. Just pure silence. For a long time, the only sound I could hear was my own breath. And then, the faintest whisper. Faint, but unmistakable. "Find me." I snapped the radio off. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Not even when the dawn broke with a red sky, the kind of sky that makes you feel like the world's on fire. I stared out at the trees, at the stretch of forest that seemed to close in on the tower, pressing in like it was waiting for me to step out. But I couldn't. I didn't trust the silence anymore. I didn't trust anything. I went to the windows, locked every latch, checked every door, pulled the curtains shut so I couldn't see the woods. I tried to tell myself it was just the isolation, the months of nothing but trees and radio calls and empty nights. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't just the isolation. It was something else. Something older. Something watching. And I'd finally been heard. The voice on the radio wasn't just a warning. It was an invitation. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I can't remember really. One moment I was in the tower, listening to the wind, watching the last bit of light fading behind the peaks, and the next, everything was on fire. My hands were covered in gasoline, and I was standing there with a match in my palm, looking at the tower like it was a thing I no longer recognized. I guess I'd finally lost it. I'd been hearing things for days now, whispers through the static on the radio, low voices that would only call my name. The first time it happened, I thought I was imagining it. I blamed the isolation, the cold, the hunger. But it kept happening, louder and clearer each time, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was James. It was always James. "You can't leave," he'd said, his voice seeping through the crackling airwaves, as if he were standing right behind me, whispering in my ear. "You know what I've seen, Alvaro. It's too late now." I don't know why I thought burning the tower would help. Maybe I thought it would stop the whispers. Maybe I thought it would erase the things I'd seen in the woods, things I couldn't explain, things that were never meant to be seen. But now, as the flames rose, licking the sky, I felt a weight settle in my chest. The tower was burning, but the forest wasn't. The fire danced higher than I expected, curling in on itself like a creature in pain, its red teeth biting at the wooden beams. The heat made my skin blister and peel, but I didn't move. I couldn't. Something told me I had to stay. Something told me I was being watched. The smell of the smoke was suffocating. It tasted bitter in my mouth, like metal, like old blood. I didn't know how long I'd been standing there, frozen, staring at the fire. Time was slipping through my fingers like sand. Hours, maybe. Days. It didn't matter anymore. I could hear the forest, too. The wind had picked up, howling through the trees like it was angry at the fire. And then, the sound, the one thing I hadn't expected. The trees began to move. It started slow, almost imperceptible. I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on me. But then the branches jerked, sharp and unnatural, as if they were being pulled by invisible hands. The ground trembled, a low, rumbling hum I felt in my bones. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it was bad. Worse than bad. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, like something was reaching out to claim me. And then there it was. In the trees. A shape. Thin, stretched like a man but wrong. James. I didn't want to believe it, but there he was, standing in the shadows, watching me with those hollow eyes that used to look so full of life. His face was pale, skin stretched too tight, and his mouth was too wide. It grinned at me, but not in a way that made any sense. You burned it, didn't you? His voice was soft, too soft. It slithered through the smoke and heat, curling around me like a serpent. Now you understand. I took a step back, my breath coming in short gasps. No. It's all part of it, James interrupted, his voice a thread of madness. The forest, the fire, everything. You think you can escape, but you can't. The forest remembers. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt nailed to the ground. The flames from the tower flickered and twisted, casting shadows that danced around me. But it wasn't just the fire that was moving. It was the forest, too. The trees were leaning in, bending, shifting like they were alive for me. James, I gasped, my voice a strangled thing in my throat. What have you done? What are you? He smiled again, but it wasn't a smile. It was a rictus, like something had hollowed out his soul, replaced it with something else, something darker. I didn't do anything. It did it to me. I backed away further, desperate for air, for space, but the trees closed in around me. The air was thick now, the smoke turning to something foul. Something suffocating. It smelled like rot, like decay. And then, the sound again, only this time it was louder. The earth beneath me shook, and I realized the ground wasn't solid anymore. It was moving. The forest was shifting, growing. The trees were closing in, surrounding me. I could feel their eyes, hidden beneath the bark, watching me with hunger. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Panic exploded inside me. The fire wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to cleanse the woods, to burn it all down. James, I shouted, my voice breaking. What do you want from me? His grin widened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something else behind his eyes, something ancient, something older than the forest itself. I don't want anything from you, Alvaro. The forest already has you. I turned and ran then, not knowing where my legs were taking me, but just running, desperate to get away, desperate to escape the clutches of the woods that had come alive around me. The last thing I saw was the tower, crumbling, falling into itself like a house of cards, the flames snuffed out by the trees. I kept running, through the smoke, through the whispers. But no matter how far I ran, no matter how fast, I couldn't outrun the thing that had been waiting for me. The thing that had been waiting for all of us. The first thing I remember after waking up was the sky. It wasn't right. The clouds were too still, too white, like someone had painted them on. It took me a moment to realize I was lying on the ground. Cold dirt, wet from the early morning mist, pressed into my skin. My hands were scraped raw, my fingernails filthy with what looked like dried mud and blood. It was hard to tell where I'd been, or for how long. When I sat up, the world didn't seem to make sense. The trees around me stood tall, but none of them looked familiar. The forest had shifted while I was gone, or whatever had happened. I thought I could hear the wind, but it wasn't the wind. It was the sound of something moving, something just behind me, just out of reach. The sun was rising, but it didn't feel like morning. It was like everything was happening in some sort of loop. My mind kept racing, trying to place the last few days, but the memories were too scrambled. The fire tower, the forest fire that vanished. James. My brother. Their voices. That damned journal. My body felt heavy as I staggered to my feet. My legs wobbled, weak from what I now understood had been days without food, maybe even water. But the hunger didn't seem to matter anymore. Nothing mattered except one thing. I needed to get out. I couldn't remember the way back to the tower. My mind was a fog, the edges of reality fraying like a rope that was ready to snap. But I knew one thing for sure. If I didn't get away from this place, if I didn't leave now, I wouldn't be able to. The forest would make sure of it. That's when I heard it. The radio. Faint at first, like someone breathing into the mic. The static crackled, and then a voice broke through. Alvaro, can you hear me? I froze. I didn't recognize the voice. My heart started pounding. How long had I been out? Was this someone from the outside? Or was it just another trick of the forest? Alvaro, the voice repeated, clearer now, with a hint of urgency. It's Cassie. Are you there? I couldn't believe it. Cassie? She'd gone silent days ago. Her last transmission had been a garbled mess of panic and static. But now her voice was calm, almost distant. The relief that washed over me was short-lived. I glanced at the radio, and for the first time, I saw something that made my stomach twist. The dial was on the wrong frequency. I'd never set it there. No one had. Alvaro, are you there? Cassie's voice persisted, and I was about to respond when something clicked in the back of my mind. The way she said my name, it wasn't right. The tone was too familiar, too knowing. Like she'd said it 1,000 times before, like we'd had this conversation 1,000 times before. The static surged again, and then the voice changed. It warped, twisted, became something else entirely. Alvaro, you shouldn't have come back, the voice rasped, and a chill shot through me. You'll never leave. I dropped the radio like it had burned me. My hands shook as I scrambled to my feet. The voice, the thing that spoke through the radio, wasn't Cassie. It was James. I could hear his laugh, that dark, twisted sound that still haunted my dreams. My head felt like it was spinning, the ground tilting beneath me. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay here. The trees blurred around me, the forest closing in like some living thing, twisting and turning with every step I took. My legs were on fire, my chest ached with each breath, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop until I was out. That's when I saw it. The tower. It stood tall in the distance, smoke still curling from its charred remains. The flames hadn't consumed it completely. It was still standing, still waiting. For me. I collapsed to the ground, breathless, heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't tell if the tower had been standing there all along, or if it had somehow moved closer to me, like it was drawing me in, like it was calling me back. I crawled toward it, my mind losing its grip on reality. The radio voice was still there, still echoing in my head, whispering, mocking. It felt like I was walking through a dream, no, a nightmare. My body was moving without me, carried by some unseen force. But I had to go. I had to find the answers. By the time I reached the tower, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I couldn't remember what had happened. I couldn't remember if I'd ever really left. The journal was still with me, tucked in my jacket pocket, but I hadn't opened it since I'd started running. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. It was writing itself now. The tower was quiet, still. But I knew deep down it wasn't empty. Inside, I found the radio. Still crackling with static. Still waiting. I picked it up. My hand was trembling as I turned the dial, searching for something. Anything that could explain what I was hearing, what I was feeling. My fingers brushed over the buttons, and that's when I found it. The frequency was set to the exact same channel I had used all those years ago, the one James had used. The one no one should have ever touched. The message came through, just as I feared it would. Help me, it said. Only it wasn't a plea. It wasn't desperation. It was a command. A warning. I dropped the radio again, but this time I didn't run. I couldn't. Because I was already too deep, already too far gone. And when I turned around, there was no one else in the tower, just me. Just the empty forest beyond the glass windows, watching. And the voices, always waiting. I can hear it even now, the hum of the radio. A sound that should have brought comfort, the kind that tells you help is just a channel away. But there's nothing comforting about it anymore. It's been almost a year since I left the tower, and I can still feel it on the edge of my thoughts, the pressure of it, the whispering, the watching. I thought I was done with the forest. I thought that by walking away, it would all fade into the past. But you don't leave something like that behind. The forest doesn't let go of you, and it's still there waiting. Watching. I know because I've heard the stories from the others. New lookouts. People who've never heard of James Holloway, or the strange things that happened in the Bitterroots. They go up there, thinking they'll just be sitting on a mountain, checking for fires, keeping an eye on the horizon. And I wonder if they ever realize too late that the horizon is watching them back. The forest never forgets. It's like it knows what you're afraid of before you even do. It lures you in with its quiet, its stillness. But there's always something beneath the surface. Something dark, something hungry, and it will take its time. It's patient. The trees, the wind, the night, they're all part of it, part of a thing you'll never understand until you're deep enough to see it for what it really is. I heard a report just last month. Another lookout had been assigned to my old tower. I couldn't even bring myself to listen to the rest. There was nothing left to say. But when the words about the new guy faded, I couldn't help but think, if he only knew. If only he knew what was really waiting for him up there, in that tower. There's something about that place. Something that calls. I can't explain it. Maybe I'm just losing my grip on things. Maybe it was just the isolation, the long nights. But I think about it every day like a ghost gnawing at the edges of my mind. The scratch of a pencil on paper, the weight of the journal in my hand. And that one final entry, the one I found before I left. I can still see it, burned into the back of my eyes. Don't listen to the voices. Burn the journal. Don't look down. That was James's last warning to me, but maybe it was meant for someone else. Maybe it was meant for the next person who takes my place. I'll never know. But when I heard the radio crackle to life the other night, when I heard that familiar static hum, I knew. I knew it wasn't over. There's no escaping that tower. And I don't think I'll ever truly leave the forest. Not really. As I sit here now, the wind picking up outside my cabin, I can almost hear it again. The whispers, faint but real. And I can't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, it's not me that the forest wants. Maybe it's the next one. The one who's sitting up there now, trying to ignore the strange feeling crawling down the back of his neck. Trying to focus on the work, on the job. But it's not just about watching the fires, is it? No. It's never been about the fires.